flooded in 2008 and caused a lot of devastation. And it's also about a $250 million restoration project. So it's kind of a big deal. And Dan comes in on a regular basis to update you guys and take your phone calls at 219-845-1100, 219-845-1100. Dan, how many people on the board of this right now?
There are 9 slots. We are awaiting final confirmations of the different appointments by the mayor of Hammond, the mayor of Gary, and 2 by the commissioners. So they have to go through the process, and as we talked just briefly about, was that this is a board that's different. There's specific qualifications that if you don't meet those, construction management, I believe financial management, construction and project management, finance, and the third one escapes me. But if you do not qualify, then those appointments can be rejected. You can't have more than one in one city under the old guidelines, and we're talking about guidelines with child support, and then under the new guidelines, they all have to be effectively appointed by the governor. The mayor can appoint someone, the commissioner can say, I want this person to be here, but the governor ultimately and his legal staff have to make sure that they meet the qualifications. And so we're in that process now, and we're continuing to do the things that we need to do to make sure that it's functioning, and people are still moving dirt where we need them to move dirt and pull out blockages where we need to.
Speaking of moving dirt, now, as with the new funding, you've got a bunch of money coming next year, right?
Next year, correct. Roughly $7 million, $8 million, depending on the collection rate. But that was, I budgeted for 7.5.
$7.5 million. So you're starting to do some stuff now against that money, right?
Correct.
What are you doing now?
Right now, we just started last week on Marshalltown levy, which was a levy that became recently decertified, which means the Army Corps doesn't feel as though it would withstand any flood, and FEMA wouldn't accept it for flood insurance purposes. And Marshalltown is, for the listeners, Central Avenue that runs through Lake Station, and if you continued north, it would be into Gary. That's the start of the levee, and then it would run, I believe it's to Iowa, and then it wraps around to 21st Street in Gary.
So it's kind of on the east side. It's East Gary.
Yeah, the far east side, and it borders, or somewhat borders, Lake Station.
Yeah, so it's not like Miller, which would be the northeast side.
Oh, no.
It's kind of the...
Correct.
Yeah, it's the east side. So you're already starting work there. Now, Marshalltown, of course, if I remember the chronology correctly, when the Little Cal flooded, we had that dude on the motorcycle going around saying, guys, all you got to do is clear out the ditches in Gary and all that water will flow. Well, evidently somebody must have heard them. They went over, they pulled out all the logs, and all that water flowed out of Munster, and it flowed directly down the Little Cal into Marshalltown.
And that's correct. Actually, I have a picture that was from an Army Corps inspection that occurred in August of '08. It was almost 1 month to the date before the rain came. Showed how large that blockage was. The blockage was so large that it actually, if you look at it today, there's a stain, a water stain that's on the cement blocks that shows how high it was. And then, of course, you could see today what it looks like. But the blockage was so large, trees were going through the middle of it, and what they were afraid of when the situation was happening in 2008 is if they remove that blockage too quick, then you would have just created another problem downstream. Sort of like taking the plug out of your bathtub. All of a sudden, the rush of water would have basically created a tidal wave downstream. So what they did was my understanding, it wasn't there, was they removed it slowly so that it wouldn't flood Marshalltown, and that's why you saw the slow drop in the areas to the west.
But it still did flood Marshalltown.
It got close to Marshalltown, never flooded Marshalltown. There were areas in Gary where it did flood because the closures didn't go up properly, and that IUN is the historic. Everyone talks about IUN. It flooded IUN. The reason, and we've talked about this before, the reason why IUN, as I drop my phone, that's probably a good thing. The reason why it did flood IUN is because IUN has a gravity-forced stormwater sewer, which means gravity takes it to the river. If the river's high, though, then it doesn't go anywhere, and it basically backs up in the parking lots. Now, the state and IUN have addressed that problem by putting a new pump station in at the 33rd in Connecticut in Gary. And if you've noticed a lot of work around IUN with the new sewers, that will address it, because now it will take the water and pump it into the river as opposed to waiting to see if it's too high and it won't make it.
In the past, on the anniversary, 2 years after the flood, I played some of the tapes from it, and the outcry, people were calling in, you can't play that, it's too quick, you know, it's too painful. One woman didn't know it wasn't live, and you know, we had all these warnings about it, but mainly, you know, we can put every 2 minutes that this isn't live, and they're going to figure it out.
Sure.
But mainly, the calls were coming in from people who said, you can't play this, Chad, it's too fresh, we're still rebuilding our lives. And it wasn't just one call or two call or 5 calls. It was, you know, we started playing the tape. Do you think it's been enough separation from 2008 that I can play some of that on the?
I mean, I would like to hear it. It's always good. Bill Baker, always every beginning of the meeting, we have a poster board of all the flood pictures from Hobart, Cherville, Munster, and basically that's the mantra. That can't happen again. And that's what the board has told me, is whatever it takes, give us a shot. Make sure there's no blockages. Make sure the pump stations are working the best they can. So, you know, in a personal sense, I'd love to hear it. I remember it as much as I can because everyone here at the station and was sleep deprived and running basically everywhere. But you know, for some people, it's still, you know, they're still rebuilding, and if you just have to go through some of the lots to see where there's no more houses there. So there once was a house and no longer, and that still hurts them, I'm sure. So, I mean, I'd love to hear it just from a historical standpoint, but I know for some people it's still painful. I mean, it totally changed the dynamics of their lives. I mean, I'm sure they'd love to do something more than come to the little Cal Commission meeting every second Wednesday. But they do because I think that's sort of therapy. They want to make sure things are happening, and it's tough for them.
I may play clips, but I figured at the 5-year mark, I might play some of the more painful people calling in and as their houses are flooding and how about when you were on the air?
I'll never forget that. You know, I have my phone and you make fun of me having my phone, but I remember you calling me on my cell phone, or someone called me on my cell phone saying, you need to get him on the radio, a house just blew up, and I think you could hear me on the offside, and I said, you need to go to line whatever it is, and whoever was hosting put it on, and that was just real life stuff going on, and we learned from that experience, because one of the reasons why we're here today is to talk about issues, whatever they are, someone has, but also, we've developed a better communication plan to get the word out, to make sure that there's one single voice and you don't have cities and different towns and everything, and you don't have councilmen coming in here wanting to punch you, and, you know, because they weren't necessarily affected or told what they could do. So we've developed that through, you know, for 2 years now. We've been meeting every month with every community, Gary, Hammond, Griffith, Munster, Highland, the state of Indiana, so we have a better message. So in the event that Mother Nature chooses to have her way with us, then, you know, we're going to have to make sure that we notify people of what to do next.